What's up, everybody? I'm Gerald Bourget. This is Derek Montilla. We are here in the Four Peaks mini bar for a new G-Rated to talk about what we do in the shadows. And Derek, I know I can speak for both of us when I say this is one of our favorite comedies on all of television.
I love this show so much. I mean, it's so funny and irreverent, but they do such a good job of storytelling, and it's just a great show. It's one of the rare like spin-offs of a thing that I feel like is better than the original, and that's what it feels like at this point in the show's run.
Yes, for those of you who are not aware, this is actually a TV series spin-off based on a movie, Taika Waititi. It's a really great movie.
It is.
It's very funny.
Movie. Yeah,
but this show has just become its own entity and surpassed that of the original. Just wrapped up season 5, which if you'd have told me this show would make it this far and still be going strong after watching the first season, I would have thought, I don't know about that. But they just keep finding ways to make this storyline, this sitcom, this mockumentary kind of hybrid of what it is into something that's entertaining and still has some has the levity, but also has enough storylines to keep propelling it forward.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, is that they've done a good enough job of making you care about these characters, that especially this season, when they hit this story arc of Guillermo finally becoming a vampire, it's just incredible. And because it's something that they laid the groundwork for in the previous 4 seasons, that's what made this arguably one of the best seasons of the show. But I also think that it has to do with the fact that they are able to kind of interweave each episode being its own funny thing with that main storyline, and how like it kind of, you know, it changes from episode to episode, and really then they don't really disappoint us with giving us the big answers in the finale of what was going on the whole time.
Right. And I do want to talk about the season arc and kind of our favorite highlights of the season, but we should also highlight the fact that like on this show, part of what makes it so great is that the main cast, you could literally sit and watch them interact with each other for half an hour and it go absolutely nowhere. And it's so funny because I don't know if there's a more dedicated cast of character, because if you think about it, like the premise of real life vampires being in this mockumentary that's set in the real world Staten Island, like it sounds like you really have to find people that commit to that. And I feel like Matt Berry with his old timey pronunciation of things.
Matt Berry is
phenomenal.
and like the entire cast feels like actors that we've seen elsewhere, yet this is really their big breakout role. Like it's not to say they haven't had their own, you know, they haven't starred in other things here and there, but they've never had a role this big where they were the main character. And like I think it's just the fact that they do come together so well. And like the overall premise of them being like such a tight-knit group that they don't really let outsiders in, and that's kind of part of the main story arc, right? But but the cast does such a good job of that. Like they really do feel like this, you know, collective of vampires. Even Colin Robinson, you know what I mean?
Oh man, Mark Proksch as Colin Robinson is so funny.
He's another genius. Like I mean, the entire cast is great. Like I really do appreciate how funny they are and how they've made these characters come to life. Like it almost feels like I'm going to have a hard time ever seeing them as anything but that at this point, which I guess is a blessing and a curse. But it shows like when you've gotten to that point with your character where you are just that character, like
they're synonymous. Like if I saw Kayvan Novak in the street, I would expect him to be dressed like Nandor to call somebody's fucking guy.
Wait, he doesn't have long hair? What is going on here?
It's Natasia Demetriou is so funny, and I feel like Harvey Guillen doesn't get enough credit for. He's kind of like the heart of the show, but he also has pretty good comedic chops as well. Some of the physical comedy as well. Like this whole ensemble is just very funny in the way they feed off of each other. I could watch it, like even if the plot was going nowhere.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about obviously how funny it is, but when you talk about Harvey Guillen and you know, Guillermo, and just how heartwarming at times he is, and how that character really is the relatable one to us humans that are watching the show, right? So like, there's just a lot of things with Guillermo that you can understand wanting to be part of a group where you don't feel accepted and, you know, like not really feeling accepted anywhere, you know, like having the doting mother and the family that are concerned about you, but also very judgmental. We kind of all experienced that kind of side of our families, you know, so like there's just there's just a nice balance there where it comes to that. And I think that's really what makes this a good show. Like, these characters at times are just terrible,
Right.
awful people,
Right.
or vampires, I should say. And like, again, there's just times where they are very sweet and they are very loving and caring to each other. That really makes this, like, it goes from just that comedy to actually being a show that I love
Right.
the show. Yeah.
And I love that it's able to flip the switch back and forth between those warm moments where the vampires accept him as part of their family, but also like there's going to be a diner full of dead people because they were hungry.
Yes.
And like Guillermo's no saint either. Yeah. He's had to, chop up his fair share of bodies because of his Van Helsing blood. He's had to kill his fair share of vampires as well. But when it came to really getting down on a living, breathing human and sucking his blood out of his neck, it was just a bit too much for him. I love the touch. I love the touch about like him smelling the shampoo and like, like, this was just a guy who put on his shampoo.
He went to CVS. Right. Got it.
I love how true they were to the character in that way. Yeah. But that season-long arc, at times it felt like, okay, when are we going to get to the good stuff? When is Nandor finally going to find out? Because in the world of the show, and I love that they continue to find ways to introduce new rules to vampire society that we haven't heard to this point. But they're like, what are you talking about? This has always been a thing. Like the big one this season was that Nandor was supposed to be the one to turn Guillermo, and if he gets turned by another vampire, which he did, that's like a big insult to Nandor. He should kill Guillermo and then like kill himself out of shame. Like, it's so funny. So this whole season we're building up to, when is Nandor going to find out? One by one, the other vampires in the house find out. And then we finally get there. And of course, Nandor has to be talked down. He's hunting him. I love that he was stalking him or staking out Panera Bread.
And then Patton Oswalt had to tell him there's like 18 Panera Breads in the city, in this area.
That was so funny.
But no, I mean, absolutely the best moment in the entire season for me was when Nandor, they were like, he got bit, but it's not taking. He's like, yes, of course, because he has Van Helsing blood and it's fighting off the vampire blood. And it was like, oh, Nandor knew the whole time. Like, it's almost like Nandor. That's the reason why Nandor kept putting Guillermo on, was like, he knew he couldn't turn him into a vampire. So he essentially just kept like promising him that he would and never delivering. But it's like that one moment of Nandor just being kind of brilliant, which he isn't really known for in the show.
No,
but
he's
like,
the dumbest character.
He's just the dumbest character, but he knew in the moment everything. And he was like, no, you can't do that for him. He's got Van Helsing blood. So like, I loved the payoff there, because like you said, the entire season arc of Laszlo trying to figure it out and doing all the experiments. You have the little creatures, the little mutants he created of Guillermo,
the
and everything.
The bulldog and the sheep and the fish things. They're all calling him daddy. It's so unsettling.
But it was like all of these little things that they did all season long. And I mean, like you said, I love the fact that they kept finding out, the different vampires in the house kept finding out as the season went on. Everybody knew, and Nandor was pissed about that at the end, that everybody knew except him. But it was also like when he was hiding out from Nandor, everybody knew where he was. Everybody came and visited him. It was just such a complete season arc. I guess my only complaint is, in the end, they were able to essentially like just about reverse every single thing they did and have everything be back to normal.
So I did want to ask you about that, because I felt, on the one hand, I did feel like since day one with Guillermo, his central drive as a character has been wanting to be a vampire. Correct. It's why he puts up with so much shit through them. Obviously, he grows to care about the vampires, but when we first meet him as a familiar, that's like all that he wants.
He's
finally
working towards that goal.
Yeah, and even this season, it was a gradual progression for him, because he wasn't a complete vampire yet. And so then he finally gets his opportunity to be a real vampire, and he is one. And it lasts for like 15 minutes. And then it just, I did like, to your point about the twist with Nandor realizing that like his Van Helsing blood was fighting it off. I also liked that on a deeper level, like he understood and realized that Guillermo might not be cut out for the vampire life. And he kind of gave him his out, like asking him like, is this really what you want to do? And then they kind of killed Derek for him.
The whole ceremony that he just made up because he found some robes in the attic or whatever, right? Like, yeah, like, I mean, absolutely. The fact that that's the part about it is, like, as much as Nandor seems like he never cared about Guillermo, it's revealed in the end that he actually cared quite a bit and knew quite a bit about Guillermo. Like, they spend enough time around each other that Nandor knew that he wouldn't want this lifestyle, right? But like, it's kind of funny too, because, you know, obviously it wasn't, I'm not saying it wasn't a mystery, but like, I kind of just blamed it on the way that he got turned into a vampire as the reason why he was such a dysfunctional vampire.
So hilariously gory and unnecessary, but so funny. Yeah.
And then in the end, the reveal was just such a, like, I found myself literally going, oh, duh, I forgot. Yeah, of course. That makes so much sense.
And it's after a full season of watching Matt Berry conduct these ridiculous experiments and them all trying to hide it from Nandor.
An entire episode where he was just catatonic and no one could figure out what was wrong with him. And it was just because he was deep in thought.
Right. So funny. Any other highlights of the season? Because I feel like there were quite a few. Like, obviously the central arc was the stuff with Guillermo, but this show also does a good job of having like self-contained episodes that are just zany and like the Pride episode and Nandor going to outer space.
Yes.
So funny.
Yeah, so ridiculous. It's and I think that's the thing that's so, like, the shows that I've really loved over time, they didn't really focus too much on that overall arc, you know, and like, I like my comedies to be kind of irreverent and just, you know, I think that's what made, like, for instance, The Office such a success at times, because they weren't, you know, they got into this longer form storytelling as the seasons went on. But like, again, this show just does such a good job at like the vampire urgent care. And,
that was great.
You know what I mean? Like,
where they just are basically trying to put down any familiar that comes in.
It's like a veterinarian. You know what I mean? Like, it was such everything that they did in the vampire world was just so funny. And I mean, even calling back to Guillermo lighting Baron on fire
for the second time, burning him to a crisp.
Yeah, I mean, there was just so many good episodes this season, and like I said, the moments, it's just. It's so Colin Robinson, by the way, conducting an exit interview for being a familiar and leaving life. You know, it was just the icing on the season. It was all good.
It was perfect for that episode when they one by one trickled into his hotel room, because it showed that they do care for Guillermo, but like Matt Bear or Laszlo and Nadia both got distracted by their libidos, perfectly fitting for their characters.
Nadia going over to stop people from having sex next door, and then he's like, "Oh, she joined them." Yeah, that was just wow,
just perfect. Favorite guest appearance this season, because this show is very good at putting in very understated guests, but Patton Oswalt, you mentioned, was probably my favorite.
Mine too. I mean, just because it was just Patton Oswalt. Like, I knew it was him from the minute he picked him up, but then the fact that he was just like, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm Patton Oswalt. I'm an actor." I was like, oh, you know, the whole, you know, having a heart to heart with Nandor and making him realize that maybe he doesn't want to kill Guillermo, and then he kills like it's almost like he kills Patton Oswalt as a test to see if he'd feel bad, and he did. He was like, oh, you know?
So funny.
Oh man, that was it.
That whole scene was phenomenal. Just the way that Nandor pronounced Panera bread.
Panera bread.
It's so funny. It was funny to see Vanessa Bayer return as Evie, the other energy vampire. Colin's kind of foil. Martha Kelly and Hannibal Buress on the Energy Vampire Council. That episode, that was pretty funny too.
Just kind of passing it around.
Oh my god,
it's so funny. Benedict Wong as the what was he,
the necromancer? Yeah, so funny. There were so many. Frankie Quinones as Guillermo's cousin. He's really funny. But it was just, I feel like this season was really good. It did kind of, it felt like it was stringing things along at certain points. Like, okay, when is Nandor going to find out? We're going to have to wait till the very end, aren't we? That type of thing. My biggest complaint though is they don't really know how to use Kristen Schaal. Like, the guide's character is extremely one note, and they bumped her up to main cast this season, but it felt like they don't know how to use her or like what to do with her character, because the whole thing was basically just please like me, and they don't like her.
Right.
Like, you can only make that joke so many times.
Well, I feel like. And it goes along with Guillermo too, essentially, right? Because that's also Guillermo's kind of desire, and
Right.
it's like a big thing with them as a group is that they don't really want to let anybody else in,
Yes.
so like, yeah, but I'm with you. Kristen Schaal is just an absolutely hilarious person. So
Mhm.
at times it does feel like she's just there.
Mhm.
I did like that she got a painting added to the opening with her
Yes.
grabbing her boob grabbed or whatever. But like she definitely, in like every other show that she's been in, she's kind of stolen the show. So
Mhm.
it is odd for her just to kind of be there. But I do love her.
I do too, and I feel like hopefully now that they got this storyline out of the way where she lets them know, I don't think so, because that twist was kind of funny because they play the recording for her of them saying nice things about her,
Yeah.
to make her feel like, well, we actually did like you all along, but really they were just trying to convince Colin Robinson to like go on a date with her,
to move out and
Right.
not be in the house
Right.
anymore.
So-
Are you guys trying to get me to fall in love with her and move out?
So I'm hoping that they find better ways to incorporate her if she is going to be main cast
Sure.
again. I felt like in the prior seasons she was great because she was there for an episode and then we'd see her like
Yeah.
the next season. At this point, they need to find more to do with her.
Well, and they've done a good job of that, because speaking of Colin, he was kind of one note there, like in the first season, and then they found like lots of different ways to use him, right?
Right.
Like he became snarkier and kind of an asshole. There's the
Right.
entire little baby Colin,
Yes.
story arc.
Baby
right?
Colin Robinson.
Yeah, baby Colin Robinson, right? So it's like there's a lot there that they've expanded on with him as a character, and I thought even this season it wasn't just about the energy vampire stuff, right? Like
Right.
so they mix it in every once in a while, but for the most part, he's kind of his own thing at times. He's almost like the he's the insurance salesman, auditor of the house, things
Right.
like that. So
And I love the different jobs or things that they try to find for him to do, like running for office
Yes,
and
yeah.
giving a terrible speech
Yeah.
or like campaign speech and whatnot. My question for you is, where do they go from here, and does it really matter? Because it feels like for years it's been building to Guillermo wants to be a vampire. He wants to be a vampire.
Yeah.
He finally is one. It lasts for 15 minutes, and then everything kind of back to status quo. Does that bother you? Are you worried about where they might go moving forward? Or do you think like, you know what, whatever, it's still a funny, entertaining show?
If I'm being honest, I think that's it. Like
Yeah.
if my true reaction, like I could get all, preachy about it or whatever, because I think you're right. And like, but it's one of the more satisfying season finales that they've had, because I felt like they built up to this and they gave us a lot of answers all at once there
Right.
in the final episode. But I also feel like I don't watch shows like this necessarily for where the main story goes
Sure.
to be entertaining to me. It is more about the comedy. It is more about the silliness of a show like this. And there are so many great like shows that have an ongoing season or ongoing story that really
Right.
like that. If I'm really into it, that's the kind of stuff I'd watch. This kind of stuff is an escape from reality for me. And it's so ludicrous at times that's why I love it. So like, I'm not really worried, but I mean, I think there is a legitimate, I think, concern there that they might have hit their peak. And like you said, from the perspective of how long I thought this show would last when I watched the first season, I definitely didn't think it would make 5 seasons. So I think if it makes it 1 more or 7, like I think that's a pretty good run, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them wrap it up. But if they can, if any show figures out a way to expand on its life, it would be this show, because they can go in so many different ways at times and bring so much, newness to it.
They can. It does feel like this world that they've created is their sandbox, and they keep finding ways to expand it and dive into different sections of lore and ridiculous things. And like I said, that they pretend was part of it all along.
Yeah.
Different rules of this vampire
What was
society.
the one? Oh, you have to respect the vampire that turned you,
Yes.
when he was saying talking shit about Derek.
Right. It's so funny. Season 5, final score out of 10.
I'm going to give it a 9.
Okay,
I
nice.
thought, like I said, I couldn't, I couldn't enjoy what they did enough. Like the fact that they did tell this story that I was intrigued by. I did want to know if Guillermo was going to become a vampire and what Nandor was going to do when he found out. So they kept that going enough throughout the season that, like I said, it was a satisfying ending, but all the other comedy and everything else that they mixed in just made for my favorite season of the show.
Yeah, I think it's up there for me as well. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. Like you mentioned, this whole coming to a head of Guillermo's storyline and his arc, I think propelled it forward at times. And at the end of the day, it's just a very week in, week out funny show to watch because this cast is just phenomenal. But I think that's going to do it for this edition of G-Rated. You can follow me on Twitter at Gerald Bourget. You can follow Derek on Twitter at @cap_caveman. And until next time, keep it G-Rated.